Dear Mr. President, I'm very, very sad and very concerned. See, when I was a little kid, actually not that little, I was in high school, we had to do this civics class, and we were supposed to be in government, and everybody was supposed to write a bill, and I wrote a bill on taxes. And I didn't think there was anything weird about being named Charity and getting assigned the bill on taxes. I didn't think anything about that. And I opted for a flat tax. I said a flat tax policy was fair because then everybody would pay the same percentage and there should be no tax breaks and there should be no tax waivers, with the understanding that if you couldn't afford to pay taxes on 10% of your income, then you were making too much money. And you should stop doing certain things or maybe offload or delegate so somebody else can step up into that kind of economic activity. Everybody should have to pay their own taxes. This was my theory when I was in like 16 years old. I didn't know about what was going on with my driver's license and the president at the time. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I was supposed to write a bill for civics class, and mine was on taxes, and that was the tax policy. And then sometime later, somebody's running for president. And, at this time, I'm old enough to run for president myself, but I didn't run for president at that point in time. I had been out of the country as a teacher. I was teaching other students. They weren't quite in high school. They weren't working on composing pieces of legislation, but I was teaching English and I was teaching humanities and grammar. And part of what I was teaching had to do with literature. So at some point, there were some plays and there were some scenes that were coming up. And one of them had to do with the energy sector. Specifically, there were characters in this play that got written involving people involved with energy in the United States that were very important. There were people in that class that were geniuses. Those characters reminded me of them, almost as if they had something about them that may one day be influenced or inspired by someone like that, so that they could maybe nurture their talents, and one day when they grew up, they would be something very monumental and very important for their country and their people. You know, there was a election on. They didn't really. Election was different for them than it was for me because I was an American and they weren't. Except they were, right? But now, all this time later, I'm having a difficult problem. See, they've been doing these things with public financing that are very disturbing, and it actually reveals very substantial corruption within the municipal administrations. And nobody wants to be very forthright about the actual delegations of governmental authority between municipalities and a federal system, how it factors, how these smaller forms of corruption or more localized forms of corruption actually intersect with and among those more formal, larger federal forms of corruption. And so then there's this whole process that happens where you go to the library and you check out this book, and somebody has already hooked up a whole line of finance connected to that book, which is fiction, right? And you actually wanted to check that book out because somebody decided to screw with your mind and leave other books of fiction right there on the street, and they have harrowing implications. So you want something else by the same author to maybe balance it out. But then when it goes through the municipal finance scheme, all of a sudden it has all of these horrible, horrible connotations where it's taking people that were from your past, that were sacred to you, and that were beautiful to you. And now all of a sudden they're this horrible, terrible miscaricaturization. And it just so happens that one of these books is a horror story that involves murder. And you say to yourself, you know what, this is a fiction story. Somebody's trying to extort me with a damn library book. I am not accepting this. Well, guess what? Within a week later, you're somewhere else, and then you find a book that's not fiction about the same topic, and it's local. See, the other one was set in some sort of older setting, hundreds of years ago, involving some exotic foreign country. This one is actually about the history of the people of this state. Same kind of setting, real people. Very, very, very rare book. I've never seen anything like it. It's a holy text, it's sacred. It's the actual sacred history of the people of this state. But they don't even acknowledge their own sacred history. They're too busy trying to come up with some weird, macabre, abstract ritual performance and say, "Oh, I'm just acting. It's just a joke. Play along. Don't be so serious." You see, the book was about a convent of nuns that got murdered by the priest. Except it was fiction, right? And this other book is about a convent of nuns that were instrumental in the history and the formation of Texas. Now, one of those books was supposed to be connected to a bunch of deals they hooked up through the public finance system with a really, really, really nasty, corrupt local municipality operating under a senator that stole my fucking 11th grade tax bill for his political campaign and now wants to go through on the next stages. What do I do with the sacred history of actual holy women that helped create this state? I'm not going to sell it. But what if someone says, well, I mean, you didn't return this book? No, I did not return all of the options you set up to terrorize me involving the murders of sacred bodies that you intended to bury and then try to get me to play out in some disgusting, detestable ritual of self, I don't know, destruction. See, the worst part is I have these other books about the history of the actual government of the state, including people that were in the state government before they went to the federal government. And what you see over and over again is this is not an isolated ritual with a small fringe group of people that's, just squirrel themselves away. That somebody allowed them for a very long period of time to have a disproportionate influence over undermining their own constitutional process. And in the course of them trying to play these little rituals where they pretend like they don't know, and somebody else told me to do it, I just don't ask any questions. There's a lot of really, really, really fucking pissed off ancestors. And because they think that they're entitled to draw on the mineral rights claims of ancestors from other lands because of their interlocking directorates, there's a lot of really fucking pissed off ancestors. And even if nobody actually talks to me literally of any age group, their ancestors do. And I know they're really fucking pissed. Some of those ancestors were presidents. And not just of the United States. Right? So it's one of those things because both my young teenage student me that had their teacher give them that very important assignment in terms of civic responsibility and what it means to be a part of a government process, and the adult me that is currently trying to figure out how fraudsters can try to sell kids in order to cover up for dirty, sneaky games they play, while they also completely slander their own sacred history, creates this kind of like trifecta all by myself. Every once in a while I see pictures of you, though, right? I don't speak the same language you do. But some of my kids do. Some of my kids speak the same languages that your people do. Right? I think you should take a personal interest in this, as I have as well.